again. When you have visitors, if your dog jumps on them and tries to knock them down, that does not make a very good impression, does it? Well, if your dog jumps on it sounds like we have sound. Oh, wonderful. Okay. And excellent, we can hear me now. Thank you, Ann. That's very much appreciated. And I love dogs. That's why I'm a veterinarian. I love dogs and cats. But when I go to a friend's house to visit, the last thing I want is to get molested and, my clothes all dirtied up and all that stuff. Cindy is here. Wonderful. I'm glad you're here. So everybody who is here, please let me know. Tell me where you're from in case we haven't met. Speaking of meeting, just in case you don't know who this is, Miss America, honey, can you sit up and show people your cute face? This is Miss America, the Nickel Family Border Collie, and Tony's over here. Tony, he's sort of out of frame. There he is. And Gaston's on the floor. He'll show up as soon as the treats arrive. So we need to be able to teach these dogs good manners, don't we? When you're visiting somebody and their dog is jumping all over you, you don't want to risk offending them by reprimanding their dog or swatting at it. Well, we can teach good manners, and we can do it with kindness, and we're going to talk about that. But if this kind of thing happens at your house, please tell me all about it in the comment line, and let's go ahead and give you some very specific recommendations, because this is a problem that actually is unhealthy for the dog too. I'll explain why these things happen. And so, now that everybody can hear me, if I'm saying something, telling you information that's helpful, please send me some hearts. So, let me tell you a little bit about this issue. Some dogs jump on people because they always get attention when they do it, especially young dogs and these big goofy labs and other young happy dogs who jump on people, and then people are pushing them off and telling them, stop that, get down, and all those things. These dogs oftentimes believe that the person is playing with them. Now, here's a fundamental about canine behavior that many people have a hard time wrapping their brains around because it's so different than the way we think. And, that's an easy thing to do, is believe that, they're actually little people in furry suits, that they're just like us, only not quite as smart, or maybe they're smarter. Well, the difference is that dogs and cats are different species. We're going to talk about dogs only this time. But dogs believe that any response that they get from any human is a reinforcer for their behavior and their emotional state of that moment. Any response they get. And there's an important reason for that, is that when we study dogs in their free-living social groups in the wild, we know that the leader maintains order, keeps everybody rowing in the same direction, because survival is not assured. Mother Nature isn't always kind. And very often we have pets who, if they don't get behavioral cues from their leader, if those dogs aren't allowed to participate in going out to gather food resources, or to protect the territory, or protect some carcass that they just drug home that day, or their young, or their breeding females, well, that diminishes everybody's likelihood of survival and passing on their genetic code. These are the two primary motivators of most creatures in the wild, certainly feral dogs in particular. So we look at our pet dogs and you think, well, my dog knows that I love her and that she can be assured that there's always going to be food. Dogs don't recognize those human realities. They live with what's genetically programmed into their canine brain, and that is that I have got to earn interactions with my leader. Do you have any of those little cat treats, Carolyn? Because we can get these cats occupied over here. So when our dogs are watching us, which they do pretty much all the time, they're hoping they're going to earn a response for whatever. They, unlike the people in our family or our friends or coworkers or in the hierarchy of our workplace, they believe that, thank you, Carolyn. Here you go, gentlemen. They believe that there is going to be no response, no opportunity to earn interactions. They do not believe they're entitled to them. Never mind that you are sure that your dog knows that. She does not. And so they're looking for opportunities to earn a connection with the group, with the leader, for purposes of survival. So if your dog jumps on you and you respond, even harshly, even if you spray with water or, swat your dog, use an electric shock collar, those things happen. That dog believes that it just earned that. And in fact, if it's harsh enough of a response, then your dog is going to have a damaged relationship with you. And that is not the reason that we have pets, is it? I'm trying to, see my, oh, excuse me, gentlemen. Now you guys can, there you go. Good boys. Okay. So, Cindy is here too. Wonderful. So, I thought somebody else showed up. Anyway, so dogs need to earn interactions. They are looking for opportunities. And so, if your dog, now gentlemen, there's no point in fighting about this stuff. It's competition. Tony, there's a feeder right here for you, son. There you go. And Carla, you're back. Thank you. It's good to hear you too. And so when you have a dog who does anything and you like what that dog's doing and you want more of that behavior, then you reinforce it. You respond to it. Now dogs, with very rare exceptions, regard all humans as their leaders, including your guests. So if people come in your house and your dog jumps on them, but you're ignoring it because you don't want your dog to get a response from you believing it's been earned, but the guest, stop that, the dog says, wonderful, I earned a response from that leader. Now you can tell your visitors, thank you for the hearts, I'm glad this is helpful so far. You can tell your guests, your friends, oh, ignore the dog. They're not going to do that. People don't have the concept. It's like if you and I are riding in the car and I'm driving and you say, now Jeff, you see that pothole there? Do you see it? Watch that pothole. Don't hit that pothole. Well, you've drawn my attention to that pothole, and you know what's going to happen. I'm going to drive right into it, right? Okay, so you don't tell people ignore your dog because then they're looking at your dog, and your dog's jumping on them because your dog has come to believe that it gets a response for jumping on people, which it has in the past. Don't feel bad about that mistake. Everybody makes that mistake until somebody with my training tells them otherwise. You completely ignore it, but that doesn't mean that we don't do something to control it, okay? And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. We're going to give our dogs a structure that is canine specific, not human specific. We can try to teach our dog human followership, not going to happen. We can learn canine leadership, and our dogs will recognize that right away. And the essence of that is that what gets rewarded gets repeated. Now, we understand that, except that our dogs regard any response as a reinforcer. Any response, okay? Now let me mention attention seeking for just a minute. I want to show you a cartoon from today's newspaper. It really kind of makes the point. When you have a dog who pesters for attention, the dog who, you're working at the computer or you're watching TV or you're eating dinner or something, and the dog keeps pushing up on your arm and pawing at you or barking at you, now, some of these dogs have gotten reinforced for that, and that's why they keep doing it. But in other cases, it can be a strong indicator of anxiety. And reprimanding that ratchets up the anxiety because they know that in the canine social hierarchy that is genetically programmed into every dog's little brain, Miss America, sit up and show people your brain, this one right here, they are sure that they are not allowed to go to a higher status dog, like you or I, and solicit or demand an interaction. Not okay. What their job is to watch and wait and hope that their leader notices them doing something appropriate, and that earns them a response, which is why we catch our dog doing something right, sort of like raising children or having employees, right? Catch them doing something right, including just being calm and minding their own business. Tell them often, and they get reinforced for that. But they lose interactions for doing other stuff like jumping up or pestering, and ultimately they say, wait a minute, there is no paycheck in this job, but I consistently get reinforced for being quiet and relaxed and being well behaved. I think I'll do that instead, okay? But we can speed up the process just a little bit. And so we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But this little cartoon here, I'm going to show you because I think it illustrates it very well. This is one of my favorites in the newspaper, and it's called Lola. And so here's Lola with her dog. And she says, now seriously, Max, you just went out 10 minutes ago. And there's Max, attention seeking, right? Saying, woof, right? He's demanding attention. Really not okay. So then Max says, well, that was for a routine lawn patrol and securing the perimeter. Now it's time for potty. And Lola says, oh, and then he says to her, this is where you thank me for my service. Well, here's the reality of all this. Dogs sometimes are let out into the yard at bedtime by their people, or maybe other times of day. And people say to me, you know, I let the dog out to eliminate, and he came back in, and 5 minutes later, he's urinating in the house. What's the problem here? Well, sometimes the dog is not well house trained, and they need to be re-house trained. But sometimes what happens is you let them outside, and they're very interested in, you know, patrolling the yard and securing the perimeter, right? And, you know, if there's wild animals out there, or stray cats coming in the yard, or they smell other creatures next door, they're preoccupied with that stuff. And you let them back in, and then they go, need to go. Forgot to while they were out there. I had a case like this just the other day. It was part of an overall complex of anxiety-driven behaviors that this dog has. And so my advice to these folks was, for this particular part of it, is very quietly go out with your dog. Don't draw any attention. You're just going out there with your dog and stand there for a few minutes and watch and wait and have that dog dragging a leash. And if that dog eliminates, you don't throw a big party and have a lot of fanfare. That dog gets the reinforcer that is canine specific. That is what's genetically programmed into their canine social brains, and that is that the specific reinforcer they earn for eliminating near the perimeter of the territory, I have dog hair on my face, is the privilege of a little jaunt off territory. Dogs have a strong need to get off territory, to sniff and investigate, you know, read the bulletin boards and post messages. That's the reinforcer. So if your dog isn't really well house trained, go out there, be very quiet, have a leash handy. You can let your dog drag it around the yard. And when the dog eliminates properly, that's when you say, okay, let's go for a walk. And go for a brief jaunt. Doesn't have to be longer than a few minutes, but off property where other dogs have been so they can sniff and investigate. And then your dog comes back in and your dog goes, I like that reinforcer. It's canine specific, okay? But also watch and see if your dog is fearful of being outside, because sometimes they can be too scared to engage in natural processes like urinating or defecating. And then they come back inside, well, they really got to go, okay? Some people take their dogs for a walk before bed and let them, you know, eliminate on somebody else's lawn. We'll bring a little plastic bag. Don't leave that out there, okay? So let me tell you now about what we can do about this problem. Leashes, they don't always serve a great purpose if dogs are on a leash walk because they can feel a frustration with it. But if they're dragging a leash around, Miss America, we do sit up, honey, so people can see you. Thank you. If your dog drags a leash around inside the house, we call it a drag line, okay? And you're expecting guests. So let's set this dog up to learn something. Not to make a mistake, but to learn. So your dog's dragging the leash around the yard, and the dog begins to jump up. Now maybe it's on a guest, or maybe it's on somebody in the family. But you look back, and from experience, you can determine, okay, it's likely to happen. So what you're doing is you're watching that leash, and the dog doesn't even think about it. And you step on the leash, and have your feet not far from the leash where it attaches to your collar. Now again, if your dog is engaging in behavior you don't want, then it's important for you to completely ignore. That is, there's no dog, okay? But there is the leash. So you step on the leash and you chat with your friend. And if your dog were trying to jump up, she wouldn't be able to do it because you're standing on the leash. So you're preventing the behavior. But you can tell it's going on even though you're ignoring, because you can feel the leash pulling under your shoe. So you continue to act as though there is no dog. You're completely ignoring. And when you stop feeling the leash pulling under your shoe, That's when you look down and say very quietly, "You're a good girl, Miss America." And you tell that dog she's good for not jumping up. And what you're teaching is what we call a response substitution. In other words, instead of the old default knee-jerk response that the dog has developed over time of jumping up on people, what we're doing now is teaching the dog that not only earns nothing, but the dog actually loses temporarily its interaction, its relationship with its leader. And that's so important to dogs. They believe it's essential to their survival. So you completely take that away by fully ignoring. You're not ignoring your dog. You don't even have one, okay? So what you are doing, though, is you're standing on the leash, which the dog just doesn't recognize. She's trying to jump up and can't do it, so you're preventing the mistake. But while that attempt is being made, your dog has lost its interaction with its leader. But you know what's going on because you can feel it under your shoe, and when you stop feeling that tug, you go, "You're a good dog." Okay? Very quietly. And the reason that you do that quietly instead of with great enthusiasm is that your dog was just inappropriately aroused, and you're going to set the emotional lead here. So if your dog calms down just a little bit, you're going to foster more of that by responding very quietly, because any response for your dog will be regarded as a reinforcer for the behavior of that moment and to your dog's somewhat calmer emotional state. Okay? So having your dog drag a leash around is a very handy thing. If your dog is really excited when people come, make it easier for your dog to succeed by putting him in the other room. Richard, hello, excellent. I'm glad you're here. And Deanne, I'm glad you're here. Junebug. Junebug is your dog. I love that. So you've got to be consistent. And so you're setting your dog up to learn something, but what you're not doing is you're not punishing, you're not giving a harsh correction, and you're not making the mistake that, again, please don't feel bad, because everybody does this. They say, "Stop that," or they got the water spray, or, the Banaka stuff that people use for their breath. They spray that on the dog's face. Oh my goodness. Sometimes people have, kneed the dog in the chest. Well, if you really do it with a lot of force and cause your dog a little pain, well, that kind of aversive punishment can start working. But, do you want that kind of relationship with your dog? Something I like to say at the end of every one of these Facebook Lives is that you can teach your dog or your cat at any time that they can trust us not to intimidate them. We just really don't foster a good relationship with anybody, our spouse, others in our family, our friends, people in the workplace. You don't bring out the best in others with harshness, do we? But we set them up for success. And in this case, we're preventing bad behaviors using the leash. Miss America, you're like half asleep. She's had a friend visiting all day and was horsing around in the yard. Now she's pooped out. So I should probably let her have a nap. Something else I wanted to talk a little bit about, a little bit off topic, is Major Biden. President Biden's dog and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, they have these two wonderful German Shepherds, and we finally have pets in the White House. And so if you're a pet lover like I am, you think, this is a good sign. It's not like I don't trust people without pets, but I feel a great bond with others who do. And it's very clear to me, just by listening to the Bidens talk about their pets, they have a cat too, by the way, that they really love those German Shepherds. But those dogs aren't perfect. And one of those German Shepherds, I'm sure you've seen it in the news, took a nip out of a Secret Service agent. And as I understand it, did not cause an injury, but I'm sure that person got badly startled. And so everybody's up in arms. Oh my goodness, what should we do? Send them back to Delaware, right? Well, can you train a dog not to do that? Well, let's figure out what the heck the cause is. Because when that dog took a nip out of this person, that was not the behavior problem. That was a symptom of the behavior problem. And as much as my practice, now that I finished my residency 5-6 years ago now, and my behavior practice is all of what I do, I had over 40 years in general medicine before that. And I can tell you that when we see something in the exam room and the pet parent comes in with a concern, a complaint, my dog's jumping on people, my dog's pestering me for attention, my dog's biting people, tearing the house apart when I'm gone, the list goes on, right? Those are not the behavior problems. The problem is the underlying cause. If some dog comes in or a cat comes in coughing or having chronic diarrhea, we don't just treat those symptoms. We very often do treat the symptoms, but we do whatever we can to figure out the cause because we want to get this problem controlled, right? So, what should the Bidens be doing with that dog? Well, they need a veterinary behaviorist or maybe a PhD behaviorist, what's called a certified applied animal behaviorist. They need somebody with a serious education in this to thoroughly evaluate, okay, what happened? You know, talk to the Secret Service agent, anybody else who is nearby, and anything else in that dog's history that would indicate why did this dog behave this way toward an unfamiliar person? I'm suspicious that this has never happened towards somebody in the Biden family. And if that is true, and if this dog has a history of reacting in one fashion or another towards unfamiliar people, it is almost surely due to fear. Because if the dog, well, somebody has a note here, compared to a human temperament, how high is 104.2 in a poodle? Joanna, you visited us before, and even if you hadn't, I would answer your question. A temperature of 104.2 in a dog, that worries me. Dog's normal temperature is about 101 degrees, plus or minus about a half degree. Generally speaking, anything under 102 in a dog at rest, which, you know, in the veterinary clinic, they're often a little nervous, so we make allowances for that. If it's 102 or less in a dog or a cat, we're okay with that. We don't call it a fever. But your dog's temperature of 104, maybe 104 plus, that worries me a little bit. It is not as a severe of a concern as 104 in a human, who temperature normal, 98.6 roughly, right? In a person, that would be a 6-degree temperature elevation. In a dog, it's about a 2-3 degree elevation. But that's significant, and that dog needs to be examined and probably have a blood count and some other diagnostic work as well. And actually, that question feeds into what I'm talking about here, because when we're discussing Major, the Biden's German Shepherd, and its biting of that Secret Service agent, what was the cause of that? And does that dog have a history? Not necessarily. Maybe this is the first time Major nipped at a person that he didn't know well, but it also could be a dog who has shied away from unfamiliar people. Somebody it doesn't know comes toward it or reaches to pet it because maybe the Secret Service agent really loves dogs, has dogs of his or her own, and wanted to pet that beautiful dog, and the dog reacted with a bite. And there are those who, frankly, don't understand these things, will say, well, the dog's trying to dominate that person, or some nonsense like that. Well, that is nonsense, okay? What we really got here, let's assume for a minute that this was, well, we know it was indoors, and we know that if the Bidens and the whole, executive branch of our government did not have a White House, didn't have any buildings, but we were, still tribal people living out in the open, and that dog belonged to the leader of the tribe, and somebody did something, probably inadvertently, to frighten that dog. You know what the dog would do? The dog would create distance. Hey, I don't want to be scared. This unfamiliar person's making me nervous. And so the dog creates distance. But indoors, especially if it might have been near the corner of a room or maybe some furniture and the dog felt trapped and it had no place to go, its panic might have spiked, and that takes about 0.5 seconds. The rush of adrenaline, and that dog might have become immediately defensive aggressive. But the good news about Major is it didn't even cause a wound. Now, that doesn't diminish the importance of this, but what it tells us is that I can assure you that had that big German Shepherd intended to cause physical injury or significant physical injury, like a dangerous dog could do, then it would have. But that dog pulled his punch, and he got pretty scared. I'm suspicious of it. I'm not saying that because I haven't been privy to the details. The Bidens didn't call me and say, Dr. Jeff, we're going to fly you to Washington, D.C. I would go. I wouldn't charge for my time. I would consider it a national service, but they didn't call. Anyway, if they do, I'll go. But assuming that, like so many cases like this that occur indoors, when the dog feels trapped and panics, it is sending a very strong communication by taking a nip, saying, get back. I have no place to retreat and leave. You have to create distance because we've got to get further apart. You're scaring the daylights out of me. Sometimes, you know, in a busy place like the White House, people are bustling and coming and going. And it might be very hard for a scared dog like that to be set up for success. But if he had a safe little spot in a far corner of the Oval Office or wherever this happened, where people don't go, then that dog has got a safe area and he's protected from that fear. And I'll tell you, I felt fear in my life, and I bet most people have, and it isn't any fun, is it? And that dog needs to be protected from those things. And I certainly hope that if they take this dog to someone who is not qualified, that punishment is not used. And the dog is not set up to fail and, you know, jerked or shocked or some other thing, because frankly, those things happen. Okay, Carla, if my dog is lying quietly beside me, then nudges me to pet them, and I do it, is that okay? Carla, I'm sorry, it's not okay. Let me talk about that for a minute. Interactions should always be on the leader's terms. That's you. You, the lead dog, must initiate, you and Tom, must initiate all interactions, every one of them. And that does not mean that you have less contact, less love, affection, and all the enjoyment that your dogs are in your life to share with you. You can have more of that than you ever have, but if you want to give them security and avoid triggering inadvertently nervousness and anxiety because you're giving them a structure that's not canine specific, then what you say is, look, if you were dogs who lived in a free living group, Afro and your new dog, who I have to admit I've forgotten your new dog's first name, Carla, if you'd remind me of it, those dogs are watching and waiting and hoping that they will earn an interaction. And they should not earn an interaction for breaking a social taboo for dogs, which is demanding attention, which is what's going on. And again, please don't feel bad. Almost everybody does this, okay? So if they nudge you or paw you, you ignore that nonsense. You don't say anything because as far as you're concerned, there is no dog. And then you wait, and when that pestering stops, then you go, good dog. Hey, would you like to play? How about some petting? How about some love and kisses? How about throw the ball, eat dinner? Whatever you want. Your job is to reinforce good behavior and wait for it to occur, and then invite your dog to interact, which is a hard thing to remember, but it brings out the best. Now, if you have well-adjusted dogs who are adaptable and they pester you and you pet them and the dog goes, you know, Carla and Tom, they don't know nothing. It's okay, I'm a well-adjusted, adaptable, I'll go along. And it's all right. But if you have a dog who has a predisposition for anxiety disorders, that can create bigger trouble. Rio, thank you. I'm trying not to forget it after this, Carla. Rio and Afro. Now, I want to tell everybody about something else. This is a product that is FDA approved for dogs with separation anxiety. Let me show you this thing. I'm not advertising, I'm just sharing it with you because you do not need a prescription for it. And it's called the Calmer Canine. Whoops, oh, for heaven's sake. I just dropped the box. There we go. We're back now. And here's the deal with the Calmer Canine. This is what it looks like. It's this halo-shaped thing, and it's got this little device here. You push the button, and it puts out a targeted pulse electromagnetic field. You can see the light flashing. For exactly 15 minutes, it turns itself off. And you can get this fabric little vest, very comfy, and it has, Miss America, would you sit up so I can show people? You're too tired. You were playing too hard today. Right behind the dog's head is a little Velcro patch on this comfy fabric vest, and there's a little Velcro patch on the back of the pulse electromagnetic field device, and you stick it back here, and your dog can hang out with you, sitting next to you in your lap. You wouldn't let him run around and play because the thing would fall off. But twice daily treatments, 15 minutes, again, it shuts itself off, and the Calmer Canine has an 80% success rate at reducing anxiety. It, again, is approved for separation anxiety, but I have used this on dogs exhibiting anxiety of all manifestations. However the anxiety is manifest, the anxiety mechanism within the brain, in the amygdala and the limbic system, which has everything to do with those unhealthy physical functions, you can go to the website, which is Calmer Canine, C-A-L-M-E-R, the letter K, the number 9, calmercanine.com. And you can order one of these things. And it's the only medical device I've ever heard of that has a money-back guarantee. So if you don't like it, if you don't think it helped, send it back, they'll refund your money. And right now, by the way, they're on sale. And because I'm a veterinary behaviorist, and I make this available to others with my credentials, that you put my first name, Jeff, in the coupon code box, and they'll give you an extra 15% off. But I would strongly urge you to use this if your dog is a real attention-seeking, frequent offender, okay? And besides the fact that your dog will feel better because he or she is less anxious, you will also have a dog who is much easier to teach. Because when somebody is overwhelmed with anxiety, I mean really got a big disorder with it, learning is very, very challenging. On the other hand, if you have a dog who's much calmer, it's far easier for them to learn. That doesn't mean to say that severe anxiety disorders don't also need medication sometimes, because we do what it takes to improve quality of life. But this puppy here, called the Calmer Canine, C-A-L-M-E-R, the letter K, the number 9.com, you can check this thing out. Okay, somebody else had a question. Let's see. Another great lesson. Thank you. And a question. And I've already taken him to the veterinarian, and I was just wondering. Good. And Joanna, I hope things go well. Because my poodle has serious anxiety disorder. Yeah, I would. I'd get going on this. And I'll tell you, one reason that this came to mind for me was that so many people are going to be going back to work away from home pretty soon. And if their dog's separation anxiety was just below the surface, the dog was just managing to keep itself under control for a long time, and then their person started working from home, and the dog says, oh my goodness, I've died and gone to heaven. My person's never leaving again. And then you go back to office all of a sudden. And those dogs, many of them are going to destabilize and suddenly have a big problem. So one of the best ways of knowing what's going on when you're gone is use a surveillance camera or prop up your smartphone and shoot a video of about 20 minutes after you've left home. And if that dog's pacing, lip licking, scanning, yawning, just anything other than, well, relaxed just the way it is when you're at home with your dog, that dog may have a separation problem. And you want to get ahead of that before you go back to the office. And the Calmer Canine, there you go, is a great way of doing it. It may not be enough. Behavior modification can be really important. And if you go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeff, N-I-C-H-O-L.com, it's searchable. And you can put separation anxiety in there, and you'll find that I've loaded a great deal of information about that problem. And my website. If you don't find everything you need, you're welcome to contact my office, and I help you out one-on-one. So that's what I have to report tonight. And by the way, you can get my Facebook Live events and what we call the weekly media blog, which is actually my newspaper column from the Albuquerque Journal. You can get that in your email box every Tuesday morning. All you have to do is subscribe to my website, and it's Dr. Jeff Nicol, drjeff, N-I-C-H-O-L.com. Go to the bottom of the homepage and you can subscribe. Just put your email address. There's no charge. And when you do subscribe, I'll send you at no cost my pet first aid and CPR guide for use at home, which print those out and have them handy. Could be a lifesaver. So thank you for sharing this time with me. And I encourage you, speaking of time, to take the time to build a foundation of trust and choice and freedom for your pets. Because dogs and cats, just like people, they'll get obstinate if their leader only wants their needs met. And so a good example, when I was talking about using the leash that the dog drags around, so we call it a drag line, and you step on it at a time when your dog might be starting to jump up on anybody, and you ignore until you stop feeling the leash pulling under your shoe and then very quietly reinforce, what you're doing is giving your dog a choice. Your dog is an operant learner, just like our species. And your dog can say, gee, I can continue to try to jump up and get no place, or being as I've lost my interaction with my leader, but I always get a reinforcer when I stop that and keep all 4 feet on the floor. I have a choice. Lose the interaction or earn a reinforcer. Lose an interaction, earn a reinforcer. We've set that dog up to make a choice rather than trying to force